My name is Christy Pollard, and I'm the executive director of a nonprofit here in the state called the Metro District Education Coalition. We were founded in 2019, really in an effort to get out to residents like yourselves, to help people understand what is this pesky thing that shows up on my property tax statement? What are they using these monies to go towards? We also do a lot of work with the real estate industry. The more we can equip those folks with knowledge, the better off we all are, because when someone's buying or selling a home, those are going to be the folks that they're going to ask questions of. So we do a lot of classes with them. And then we also spend a significant amount of time with your local elected officials at the city and the county level, as well as at the state level. As you might imagine, there are a lot of policymakers who want to make sure that there's transparency and accountability in government, and metro districts are government. So we find ourselves working with them on different ordinances and legislation to provide protections and to provide more transparency and accountability for the boards and the districts themselves. So I'm going to share quite a bit of information with you this evening. I would love for this to be interactive. If you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand. Would love to be able to respond to those questions in real time. As I mentioned, if you would like a copy of the presentation, if you want to just share your email address with me, I'm not going to sell it to anybody. I'm just going to send you the PowerPoint presentation, and if there are any other follow-up materials that come out of this meeting tonight, we'll make sure that everybody gets a copy of those. So why don't we go ahead and jump in and talk a little bit. So this is our email address, metrodistricteducation.com. I give it to you for a couple of reasons. One, we have a variety of different resources on there about various aspects related to metro districts. So how metro districts are governed, how they are financed, frequently asked questions for buyers in a metro district. So feel free to make those your own. We also have short videos trying to take fairly complex topics, distill them down into bite-sized information. The other thing that is on there that I've had folks tell me is super helpful. We have a place where you can drop me a note if you have a question. You're just wondering, who should I call? Where can I go? Is there a resource that can help me? I will be the first to admit I do not have the answers to every question. But I do have resources, and I can try to help you access those resources. So feel free to use that. All of those notes come directly to my cell phone, and I will get back to you in response to your inquiry. Here's some information about Banning Lewis Ranch. At our town hall meeting that we did last week, some folks didn't think that there was a website for Banning Lewis Ranch. There's actually a really nice website that has a lot of resources for you all specific to your district. We're going to talk a lot about metro districts on the whole and the laws and things that govern them, but you all likely are going to have some questions specific to your district. So I want to make sure that you take advantage of your website, which is really a nice place. There have been a lot of recent legislative changes that have required certain documents to be on the website. The names of your board members and contact information, names of your district managers, all of that information is on that website. Here at Banning Lewis Ranch, you have a district manager. We're going to talk a lot about that. The district manager is Clifton Larson Allen. That is the firm. And then the gentleman, you have two people who are actually in this district. You have Corbin and Krista, thank you, Krista Baptist, that are boots on the ground here in this district. On your website, though, they ask any email inquiries to go to Corbin. So Corbin's email address is here for you. If you should have questions related to the district, he's the person that can be responsive to those. As a district, you're going to have an attorney that represents your district. Corbin and those folks will be the ones that will help you access the attorneys that represent the district and have that fiduciary responsibility to the district.
Do the attorneys have the fiduciary to residents or to board members?
So it is to the district specifically. So the board members, all of the elected officials within that district take an oath of office, and they have a fiduciary responsibility to the district as well. But the attorneys represent the district, and certainly residents within the district have access to those folks, but they are to act on the behalf of the district. They are not the developers' attorneys. Developers will have their own attorneys. Their responsibility is to the district, and your board members' fiduciary responsibility is to the district as well. This is just a flow chart for you all, specific to Banning Lewis Ranch. It came up during the last meeting. Folks were not certain who to call, what the flow was from a management sort of standpoint. So here in Banning Lewis Ranch, you have Metro District 1, which is the operating district. They hire, and the district manager reports to those folks. And then underneath the district management, which is Clifton, Larson, Allen, Corbin, and Krista, you have the different contractors who manage different components of the district. So your covenant enforcement is RoCal, landscape maintenance is Landscape Endeavors, lifestyle services is YMCA and Oakwood Life. Thank you for letting us use your beautiful facility tonight. And then any other contracted service providers. So your first source of contact is really going to be that district manager. If you have questions and you need information, that district manager is going to be the individual that you want to talk to help provide information, to help rectify situations. Those are the individuals that you're going to hear me reference them quite a bit this evening, but wanted to give you access to information specific to them. And then I'm just going to give you a little screenshot.
Just a point of clarification.
Yeah.
So if you go back to that slide, the District 1, the Board of Directors, all of those individuals for Banning Lewis Ranch have conflicts of interest that are on file with the Department of DOLA.
Yes, and with the Secretary
and
of
they're all
State.
Oakwood employees.
Okay. And we're going to talk, they do stand for an election. They are eligible electors. We're going to talk about who is eligible to run for those board seats and what makes them eligible. But yes, any conflicts of interest for anybody who serves on the board do get filed 24 hours before each meeting with the Department of Local Affairs and also the Secretary of State's office, which is the same for other elected officials in the state. This is just a screenshot of your homepage. It's a little bit small, but just to give you a snapshot. Under the meeting section, you can find all of the different notices for public meetings, for the board meetings. Metro districts are government, so they have to publicly notice those. So if you're wondering when those meetings are being held, where they're held, that will be where you will look. Under the documents section, I want to highlight that there's a lot of information there. A lot of this is mandated to be there. So if you're wanting information, documentation, things that have been filed with the county or the city, things that have been filed with the state of Colorado, those are available under the documents. So in there you can find the annual report, which is a look back over the last year of what's happened in the district. Audits, Metro districts have to undergo an audit annually, so those audits are available. Your finances, the financials, the budgets, all of that different information is there. If you want to see the boundaries, district boundary maps are there, so you can open that up, and that may come in helpful as we talk about eligible electors and who gets to vote and sit on the board. It has to do with the boundaries of that district. So just a quick snapshot of your Banning Lewis Ranch.
So if I'm not able to attend a meeting and I want to know what happened, are the minutes required to be posted?
I do not believe that the minutes are currently on this website, but they are made publicly available. So you can reach out to CLA and they will make them publicly available. Anything that is a part of the Metro District is open to the public with very limited exceptions. So minutes, and But when we take a quick break, I'm gonna look, they may be there with the agendas, I just don't know that for sure off the top of my head, if they are there, but I will double check that, this evening. Yes, sir.
What's the difference between the metro district and like I'm on a metro district, one block over, they're in a homeless association.
That's a great question.
Is that still, are they under the metro district too?
That is a great question. We're gonna talk about that. So the question was, what's the difference between a metro district and an HOA? So, metro districts and HOAs are, governed under different statutes of state law. So metro districts are government. They're governed under Title 32 of Colorado state law. HOAs are private entities, and they are governed under the Colorado Common Interest Opportunity Act. I believe here in this district, though, in Banning Lewis Ranch, state statute allows for the district to take on the functions of what you and I would think of as a traditional HOA. So that covenant enforcement, making sure that, houses aren't neon green and, cars aren't.
Well, I know they pay more than we do. For one block over, they pay about $100 more than I do.
Yeah, and so HOAs will typically have a fee associated with them, and they are private, and they have their own covenants and such, and can remain private. If the covenant enforcement is done through the district, remember, metro districts are public, they're government. So what that means is everything that's done by that has to be public. So if you have, for example, a pool that was paid for by your tax dollars, that pool must be made publicly available. You can't just say the residents within this little neighborhood can use it. So I believe, and I don't know what this next street over is it also in Banning Lewis? So they are gonna have different fees based on what the services are for that district.
Yeah, I was gonna say, everyone within the Banning Lewis Range community is under a metro district. We don't have HOAs, although a lot of people refer to metro districts as HOAs because that's what they know. There are people that pay more fees, monthly fees, and a lot of that has to do, we have a lot of homes that have shared driveways. And they pay additional fees for their landscaping, snow removal, things like that. With the exception, I think, of the retreat. The retreat also pays extra for that.
Right. And we pay, for our lifestyle services also, so.
So it's gonna vary from district to district based on the services that are provided. So that's why your one, I assume it's probably district.
It's by home type.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, it's by home, rather than district by district, it depends on the type of home that they have. So, and I'm not, Ron, you're probably more familiar with this, but carriage and whatever.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and it because of the level of service. So what is it? Big one is snow removal, is it not?
Snow removal,
Some landscape. Irrigation.
Turn on, turn off.
Yeah. So that's where the difference is between, you can have a house right next to you and they could be paying could be right around $100 more.
Yeah,
A month.
so I think that's what, 75 versus 86.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
So the short answer is for Banning Lewis Ranch, it is the Metro District that is taking on those functions of what you and I would think of as a traditional HOA. So the district is authorized to do that. Yes,
And
sir.
so that authority is granted under state statutes?
Yes. Yep. So let's go ahead and dig into that because we're gonna cover all of that. So again, yes, sir.
Real quick, so I'm actually mapping to Metro District number 2 and regional Metro number 1. Is that the same as District 1 or is regional different?
No, so can I ask you to talk about what your regional district does, what the difference is?
Regional Metro 1 is also another finance district that pay for some other infrastructure. So basically, we're paying back those debt obligations.
So it is not uncommon.
Is that covered in that on the website or is that?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
So,
Yes, so the boundaries for each of those districts are on there and each have a service plan. So we're gonna talk about what's in that service plan, but it's all going to pay for public infrastructure. So let's dig into the meat of that, because that is really the meat of why we are here. Again, if you want a copy of this, please just give me your email address and we can shoot all of this around to you all. So why are metro districts needed? Let's go back to the very fundamental sort of reasons why cities and counties might utilize this financing tool to finance and build public infrastructure in communities. So here in Colorado, metro districts have been on the law book since the 1940s, so they are not a new tool. They are part of Title 32 in Colorado state law, which is the Special District Act. So metro districts are special districts. The term is synonymous. Metro district just means that they are providing 2 or more services, and we're going to talk a little bit about what those services are in the law that are allowed. But why did we start to see a proliferation? We've had these on the books for quite a while. Why did we start to see a proliferation of these really in the mid-'80s, early 2000s? So here in Colorado, we have a constitutional amendment called the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, TABOR for short. Everybody familiar with TABOR? So TABOR has a variety of different components associated with it, but one of those components says that if your city or county or any governmental entity wants to raise your taxes, they have to ask your permission first. So they have to make their case and they have to ask your permission. So let's say that there is a developer in Colorado Springs, since we're in the municipality of Colorado Springs. They've got a 1,000-acre piece of dirt and they want to build 200 homes. They're going to have some commercial properties, and gosh, Coloradans, we love our amenities. We want some trail systems to hook into the other trail systems, and maybe a pickleball court so the kids can play pickleball in a pool. And so the developer goes into the planning staff at the city and says, I've got this 1,000-acre plot, and I've got this vision for this mixed-use development. It's going to be fantastic. And the planning staff says, well, that's wonderful, but before you build that, we're going to need you to put in, and we're making up numbers, but we're going to need you to put in 100 miles of road. We're going to need you to put in 100 miles of sewer. And oh, by the way, there's another community that's going to be adjacent to yours. We're going to need you to upsize that sewer line in anticipation of that future growth so that we can ensure there's capacity. And you know what? Gosh, putting 200 homes, that's going to create a lot more traffic on the highway. So we're going to need you to put an additional turn lane on the highway here so that folks can access this beautiful new community. So how are you going to pay for that? How is that going to get funded? So the city could say, you know what? It has been a fantastic few years. Monies are rolling in, tax dollars. We just don't know what to do with all this money. We're just going to build those streets and sewer out of our general fund. Doesn't happen very often, but it could. The city could say, we're going to finance that and build it ourselves. Or the city could say, well, you know what? I bet the residents in Colorado Springs are going to be super excited about this vision as well. Let's go ask them if they would like to raise their property taxes to build the roads and the sewer for this new community out here. So they put a ballot out, and all of the folks have to sit down at their dinner table to vote on that ballot initiative. And well, for purposes of this example, the development will say it's in northern Colorado Springs. Well, the folks down in southern Colorado Springs are going to look at that and they're going to say, why would I raise my property taxes to build streets that I'll never drive on, sewer that I certainly will never use, my kids won't get to use the pickleball court or the pool? No, thank you. I don't care to raise my taxes for this new development. Okay, ballot initiative fails. City can't raise their taxes to build these new roads and sewer. So the city could tell the developer, you know what, developer, you've got to go out and find private financing. You got to go to a bank, and you got to find a private lender to lend on this. And if that's what the city requires, then that's what the developer has to do. And then those costs get built into each lot price. And it gets passed on to the consumer through what you and I would do when we purchase the lot, and we have to recoup those costs. If that's what the city required, absolutely, the developer has to do that. A lot of times though, is there anybody that's a banker in the room this evening? So a lot of times we'll have a banker in the room. If you talk to a traditional lender, a banker, oftentimes for these larger mixed-use projects that are typically gonna have phases, they're gonna build out over 20, 30, sometimes 40 years. Traditional lending sources aren't there because it's just too risky. They wanna see the houses coming out of the ground, they wanna see the infrastructure built before they will take on that risk. But if that's what the city requires, then absolutely, that is what the developer would have to do. Or the city could tap into this financing tool that's in Colorado state law called the Metro District to finance and build the public infrastructure and spread those costs out over time, similar to a mortgage, using tax-exempt, low-interest bonds, and only the property owners, only the individuals within that district are the ones that will pay for that infrastructure over time. So many cities and counties view this as a fair and equitable way to be able to build that stuff that's gotta go in the ground before you're gonna get a single home to be built, and only impact those individuals that will actually utilize that infrastructure. Here in Colorado, we have over 2,400 metro districts, so it is a very commonly used tool. All of the top 20 selling residential communities are utilizing the metro district tool. 4 out of every 5 homes along the I-25 corridor are in a metro district. So it is very, very common. I will also just say, and I know this gentleman's from Florida, I believe, it is not unique to Colorado. It is a tool that is used in many states around the nation, from Florida to Texas to Utah to Arizona. Other states use it as well. They call it different things in Texas. They call it mud, but it is not unique to Colorado. So let's talk a little bit about what specifically is a metro district. What does the law say that a metro district can and cannot do? So a metro district, again, is in Title 32 of Colorado state law, and a metro provides 2 or more services. And the law is very specific about what those services can be, how your taxpayer dollars can be used. There's a perception that it is the wild, wild west, and metro district can use these monies however they want. They cannot. The law says that metro districts may finance and build street, water, sanitation, park and recreation. Park and recreation is where you're going to find the pools, the trail systems, traffic-related safety protection, transportation, television relay and transmission, mosquito control, storm water, covenant control, and enforcement. Anything that is outside of that list of activities must be financed through other means. It cannot use those taxpayer dollars to finance it. So let's go back to our example of the developer that's working with the planning staff here in Colorado Springs. So once they determine that they're going to use this funding mechanism to finance and build the streets and the sewer and the public infrastructure, they are going to create a document called the service plan. And that service plan is going to be the charter. That is going to be the document that is going to guide that metro district. So in that service plan, the city is going to spell out specifically from that list which of those services that district is authorized to finance, build, maintain, and operate. They're going to document that. In addition to that, they're also going to put some restrictions in there. And the cities and counties have a lot of discretion on what they can require of the district and the restrictions. They can get very granular. So they're going to put things in there like a cap on the total number of mills that can be assessed per property. So a mill is the unit of measurement that is plugged into the formula for property taxes. So going back to our second grade year, tens, hundreds, thousands, millions, a mill is the unit of measurement for property taxes. So they're going to put a cap on the total number of mills that each property can be assessed. A common standard that we see is 50 mils. They're also gonna put a timeline on that. How long can that debt be assessed on each of those properties? We typically see 35 to 40 years, again, similar to a mortgage. So you district may assess 50 mils over 40 years. And then they're gonna put a cap on the total debt amount that the district can take. So if you've got these 200 homes that they can assess 50 mils over 40 years, they're gonna put a cap on the total debt of, and then they're gonna run some pretty complex financial pro formas, but $12 million, or whatever that number is. And the district will work, or the developer will work hand in glove with city staff to get engineering certificates and such on what the actual cost will be. City council doesn't just willy-nilly pick a number. It is done very methodically, but they will put a cap on the total amount of debt that that district can take. So you district can assess 50 mils over 40 years up to $12 million. And once you reach that cap, you can't take 1 cent more. Because guess what? Metro districts are government, so that means they are also subject to TABOR. So that service plan, if you're wondering exactly what was allowed within your district, that service plan is a document that is publicly available that you can go to, and that will help you get a picture of what those restrictions are. Like I said, the city can get really granular. In Lakewood, for example, they were recently talking about some changes to their metro districts, and the city council person said, you know what, when people buy a home in the metro district, I want to make sure that they know that they're buying in a metro district. And I think the metro district should have to put a sign in everybody's lawn with the website. Pretty onerous, but if council had said, yes, that's what we want, the district would have had to comply with that. So the city can, and they did not do that, she did not have her votes, but city can get very, very granular in the things that they require of the district, which is important. That local control is super important because what's good for Colorado Springs may not be good for Pueblo, may be different for Denver, maybe even more different for Grand Junction. So your first layer of governance is that city council or that board of county commissioners. So once that service plan, all of the ins and outs that is allowed for that district are determined, that document then goes to a public hearing. And your city council or your board of county commissioners will vote on whether to authorize the creation of the metro district. So that's your first layer of governance, is that board of county commissioners or city council. So once they publicly vote on that and approve the creation of the district, that's basically the birth certificate for that district. So first layer of governance is your city or your county. Second layer of governance is the board of directors for the metro district. In the service plan will articulate whether or not there are 5 or 7 board members, and they're on rotating terms, 5 or 7 board members who may serve on that district board. Board members are elected in odd years in the month of May. Just a quick rabbit hole. Not many people are expecting to vote in odd years in the month of May. Keep your eye out for these important elections. They're super important for you to vote in. So, who are those individuals, though, who can vote in those elections and who can sit on the board? So the law is also very specific about who can sit for those elections. The law states that eligible electors, those individuals who can vote in the election and sit on the board, pay property taxes within the district, so they have to be 18 years of age or older, registered to vote in the state of Colorado, have property and paying property taxes within the district, or the spouse or civil union partner of that individual paying property taxes. They live in the district, or they have a contract to buy or sell within that district. So what that means is I live in Centennial, But maybe I own a home here also in Banning Lewis Ranch. I, as a property owner who pays the property taxes, I'm eligible to sit on that board and vote in that election. But so are my renters, the people who are actually living in that district. So on any given property, you could have multiple people who are eligible to sit on the board and who are eligible to vote. But let's go back to our scenario. In the early stages of development, who's eligible to sit on that board? You got a piece of dirt. There's not houses yet. So the only individual paying property taxes at that time is the developer. That is what gives them the ability by law to sit on that board. It's also what gives them the ability to vote in those elections. They serve, they have to be voted in through an election process, just like your city council, just like your board of county commissioners, your state reps. But that is what gives them the ability to sit on that because they are property taxpayers within that district. Again, it has to be an individual though. It's not an Oakwood Homes has a board seat. It is an individual who has a board seat. So again, the law says property taxpayer owns property and pays property tax within the district, lives in the district, or has a contract to buy or sell in the district. That's what allows folks to be eligible to vote and to serve on that board. Yes, sir.
I don't know if you can give me an answer on this, but let's say that you're in contract on a brand new home in Banning Lewis Ranch, and the lot is vacant. I mean, it's just a vacant lot. Does Banning Lewis at that point, Banning Lewis districts, would you know what those taxes would be? Or you're gonna have to wait until the house is built, and wait a year?
That's a great question. So yes, and there are actually disclosures that are required on that lot. So let's say I go into the model home and I say, I want this particular model and I want to build it on this particular lot. On a new construction, the developer or the home builder must disclose, hey, you're in a metro district, and give you the link to the website. But they also have to do the math for you because the property taxes on the dirt it's gonna be much less than once you build that $500,000 home. So they have to do the math for you to say, here's what your taxes are today, here's what your taxes will be tomorrow with a $500,000 home, and here are all of the overlapping taxing jurisdictions. So that it's an estimate, but it should be a pretty close
Well, the only
estimate.
thing I can think happened to be was, I know they gave me a disc, okay? So it was probably in that, and I just didn't catch it. Because I was told that I was gonna have to pay $86 a month, and that was it. And this is a metro district, and it's what it costs. Well, that's not true. But it might have been, like you said, it was disclosed someplace where I didn't find it.
You said you bought 6 years ago?
Huh?
5 years ago, 6 years ago? So the new disclosure, I have no idea what happened in Europe. So there are a lot of
I probably have it
disclosures.
someplace. I just didn't catch it. And they didn't tell me that was gonna happen. You know?
Yeah, so have been a number of new disclosures added to try to avoid those sort of things very early in the process so that, you have the ability to say, gosh, I'm not sure I can afford that, or gosh, I don't want to live in a district. But so you have that information up front. We're going to talk about a few of those disclosures. The one on new construction is one of the newer disclosures that the onus is on the developer or the home builder. That came into effect in 2023, so it may not have that particular disclosure. There were others for sure, but that one may not.
Like I said, I wasn't really aware of that. I don't know if I thought they would have told me that I was gonna have to pay what I'm paying now, but it's probably there if I did.
We're trying to avoid that happening in the future. Yes, sir.
I assume you're going to talk about what the board members do.
About what?
What the board members do.
We're going to talk briefly about what the board members do, but yeah. Do you have a specific question?
No, just one.
Okay.
Quick question. On the debt details, is that within the service plan, or how do you access what was the initial debt taken on by the metro, and what is the period when it'll expire.
Absolutely, so the service plan will dictate the time horizon, so how long that debt can be assessed. The actual, you'll wanna go to the financials or the budgets. And if you're curious, we can actually link you up with a board member or underwriter to kind
Because I
of.
mean, I got the budget from last year and I can see what was paid towards the debt. But it's curious as far as when the debt was initiated and when it would expire.
Yeah, the early financing and what went into the, yeah. So, not all of the details are in the service plan. Your district manager, though, you should be able to give either Corbin or Krista a call and say, can you walk me through the initial
What was the-
financing? And my guess is too, they probably refinanced over, the last few years. So metro districts are allowed to refinance, just like when we have our mortgage. If an interest rate is better, they can go and refinance that debt, but that does not extend the time horizon. If the city or the county allow for 40 years, just because they refinance, that does not mean that the time clock does not start over. So what happens once you reach that 40-year period, once they've been assessing those properties? So what will happen then at that point in time is the debt is discharged. The taxes on that particular property within that district will go down by whatever that number of mil is for debt service. There's one other component in the service plan, though, that will affect what your property taxes are, and that's what's called operation and maintenance. So once you build all of this stuff, someone's gonna have to operate and maintain it over time. You don't want your streets crumbling, your sewer going back. So your O&M, your city could say, you know what, once that debt is paid off, we, the city, the municipality, will take on those assets, the streets, the sewer, and we'll pay for them out of our road and bridge, water and sand. Or they can say, we want you, the district, to take on that operation and maintenance function. And we're gonna allow you a certain number of mills. It's a smaller number, anywhere from 10 to 15. It's not dictated by law, but it's a smaller number that will be assessed. So once the debt is discharged, if the district is going to be operating and maintaining it, you'll see that smaller number remain on your property taxes in perpetuity as long as the district is operating and maintaining it. Yes, sir.
Is it possible that the city takes over like roads and stuff like that before the debt expires?
It could,
How
and
would we know that?
honestly, I would say I would call Krista or Corbin on that, and maybe you know that off the top of your head.
Yeah, so the city has chosen to take over most of those public streets. Yeah, and with the exception of the private streets, now, how do you know that? The easiest way is the public streets have green street signs, and the public streets have brown street signs.
Oh.
So, like the retreat, that's all private, so they have brown street signs, so that's maintained by the Metro District. In addition to the question on those, the original debt obligations, a lot of that you can find under your debt leases in the budget, or the respective Metro District, and we'll talk about what the original debt was for every series bond, as well as the maturity date for the bonds.
Where would that be?
So if you look at the budget for a specific district,
Yeah, I was looking, I have it.
it would be in the debt and leases section.
But it doesn't show the cap though on that. I don't think it shows the cap. It may or may not, I'll have to relook. It doesn't show the cap,
Shows what the
and that's,
original-
right, and that's one of the big things that we found out because District 5 got audited by the IRS. And so that was one of the things.
There's page.
That came up with that. So the cap will not show on that, you have to go back to the documents.
Yeah, to the service plan.
We have
Service plan. Yeah.
Well, but then there's been litigation since then, or, I'm not gonna say litigation, there was some kind of change. We have the District 2 stuff if you need it, because it affected our.
Yeah, last year our street got resurfaced, and they had to replace
2016 years.
curb sidewalk and guardrails.
That's just.
And I was under the impression that, I don't know if it was the builder or the developer had to get this stuff done, because the city wouldn't give their money back, and I think the city is gonna take over the rest. So I don't know whatever happened.
Yeah, and that could be one of the requirements that the city would have as part of the development process. So you're gonna see the district will have some of the things that they are operating and maintaining, the developer, and then the city and the county, and it will vary from district to district. So again, that district manager can really walk you through what the district is responsible for versus what the city is responsible for. The service plan, and it sounds like there were some changes in District 2. Are you on board for District 2?
No.
Okay, great. So I'm going to talk about your district manager, and Krista and Corbin are going to hate me probably after this, but they should be your one-stop shop to be able to be responsive and get you copies of the documentation. So again, metro districts are government, so that means that they're subject to the Colorado Open Records Act. So everything that they create, with the exception of a few things that fall under like attorney-client privilege, and that's set in statute, everything has to be made publicly available. So you can contact your district manager, they can make those documents publicly available to you. It's super important that you take advantage of that, because you want to know that transparency is super important. Metro districts, again, because they're government, also they're subject to open meetings laws, so 2 or more board members can't get together and have a cup of coffee and talk about the district finances without publicly noticing it. So all of those things that your state senator or your county commissioner are subject to, your district board members are also. With the exception, Metro district board members do not have term limits, and there's a very pragmatic reason for this. And I appreciate individuals who serve on these boards, because they are usually fairly thankless roles. But just like your HOA, getting people to run for those board seats it's like pulling teeth. And so if you were to term limit folks, you might actually end up in a scenario where no one wants to sit on that board, and certainly none of us want that to happen. So real quickly, we talked about the eligible electors. I want to highlight 2 other things that are in statute. There are some powers given to metro districts in Title 32. One of those is the power to raise revenue, and that's in fees and tolls. And we were talking about that covenant enforcement. That's a place where you will see those fees, and it's going to be based on the services that are provided. Typically it's a trash or a snow removal, something like that. They also have debt authority, and that debt authority is what's going to be utilized to finance and build that public infrastructure utilizing municipal bonds. Super busy map, but this just shows you the yellow are metro districts on the Front Range here in Colorado, super prevalent. One thing that I do want to point out, so we talked about the restrictions in the service plan with the caps on the debt, the caps on the total number of mills, the time frames. With those restrictions, typically only 1/3 to 1/2 of all of the public infrastructure that goes into one of these communities is paid for through a metro district. So what that means is that the rest of the public infrastructure, the rest of the amenities has to be financed through private money, and those costs get built into the cost of each lot. So the developers actually incentivize to build all this stuff that you and I, quite frankly, don't think about. We just assume the road's going to be there, we're going to flush our toilets, and it's going to go down into the sewer. They're incentivized to build all of this stuff in the ground using the cheaper form of capital. Why do I say that it's a less expensive form of capital? So one of the benefits that a metro district has is because it's government, it is eligible for municipal bonds. Municipal bonds are tax exempt, low interest bonds. So what that means is if you utilize the metro district financing mechanism, the interest rate, and it's going to vary depending on market conditions, but the interest rate is anywhere from 5 to 8% interest versus if you were to go out and to get a construction loan or traditional financing, it would be anywhere from 15 to 22% interest. So you can see how when you're spreading those costs out over 40 years, those interest rates can have a pretty big impact on what that total amount would be. So again, municipal bonds are available to metro districts to utilize. They do have municipal advisors who certify those bonds. Those folks are independent too. They are not associated with the district. They are independent. They are independent of the district. So one thing too that's important to highlight, metro districts are not, in some instances, they're not the best way to finance the public infrastructure. So oftentimes in smaller communities, like a subdivision that I grew up in, you know, we had maybe a little pocket park and maybe some curb and gutter, not much infrastructure. It wouldn't make sense to overlay this governmental entity and this tool on top of that. So again, these pro formas that are done in the early stages of the process are very complex, but it's super important that they do these before they layer on this metro district financing mechanism. So this is your property tax statement. You guys probably are familiar with your property tax statements. Your property tax statement is going to, in this far left-hand column, it will delineate all of the different taxing jurisdictions on your property. And it is not uncommon that you will have multiple taxing jurisdictions. So you're going to have your city, your county, your school district, maybe a library district, maybe a park and rec district, maybe a metro district. Sometimes you have two metro districts. So I'm going to pick on Sterling Ranch in Douglas County. They have two metro districts. One is the district that finances, that paid for the public infrastructure, streets and sewer, but they also have a water and sanitation district. So Dominion Water is a metro district, remember, 2 or more services. So they provide water and sewer. So in Sterling Ranch, they have 2 different metro districts. But if you're wondering who the districts are that you are paying taxes to, that will be that left-hand column. The middle column is the number of mills that jurisdiction is assessing. And then that third column is the dollar value that is associated with those mills. So for this particular property, they're in the Conservatory Metro District. They're assessing 47 mills. That 47 mills is a cumulative number. That's your debt, and that is also your O&M. So they're not going to break those two out. And then the dollar figure. So how is that calculated? And I think this goes to this gentleman on the front row. You were saying, I've heard my taxes are going to go up and everything. How is that calculated? So the district is actually, it's a mathematic formula that they plug their numbers into. So how is that formula calculated based per property? So you take the actual home value. Our home values are assessed every 2 years. So your assessed value is going to go up and down based on market rates. 2 years ago, our assessed values went through the roof. Mine on my home went up 48%. So your assessed values, that number is going to change what the dollar figure is that you're going to pay on your taxes. So actual home value times the assessment ratio. What's the assessment ratio? That is a number that is set by the Colorado legislature. The Colorado legislature has a residential assessment rate and a commercial assessment rate. They can change that number as frequently as they would like within the confines of Tabor. Typically, they'll do it once a year. The last couple of years, they've done it twice. So that number is also going to vary, and that number is going to change the calculation. In Colorado right now, the residential assessment rate is 6.25%. Commercial is 29%. So commercial properties are being taxed significantly more than residential properties. But actual home value times that assessment rate times the number of mills, so 50 mills, and that gives you the dollar figure for the amount of taxes that are being assessed for the Metro District. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.
On that tax sheet you had there, where do you say the mills were?
The bills will be in the middle column. You see,
No, they're not on ours.
they're not on yours.
They're a
Okay.
little bit different.
It's a little, every county's
Okay,
looks
we don't
a
have
little
one.
bit different.
For us.
Okay, like this.
Tax rate.
Thank you. Sorry about that, yeah, every assessor has their own flavor to it, so. Again, for the Metro District though, you can call your district manager and ask them what are the mills.
Or their board member, because it'll be coming out, you can contact one of the board members, because they have to approve, the board for whatever district you're in has to approve that mill levy.
Yeah, they have
So
to
you can
certify
get
the
that, they have to certify it, yes, they have to
Yes.
certify it, and ours is above 50, so just to let you know.
Another resource, if you're familiar with it, is the El Paso County
Yeah.
Assessor's Office. They have a specialist website where you go and look up your property, and on that website, they also show the bills are for every line.
And do they split out though, Ron, they don't split out the operating from the debt, do they? Okay, so if you wanna know how much of your money is going for debt, as opposed to how much is going into operating, which then flows into services for you, you have to get that from your board member or from CLA.
The other option that's publicly available to you, it's just a little complicated, is DOLA has a website where all those filings are submitted. And in those budgets that are with this file with the state, it does break it down into those budgets.
And what I can do, folks, when I send out the presentation, I can send you around the links. So the Department of Local Affairs is the regulatory agency here in the state that oversees all local governments. And they have a very robust platform where you can go in. So if you would like links to that, if you'd like to dig into that a little bit more, go ahead and sign up for, give me your email address and I'll send you those links so you can do some due diligence. I want to point out real quickly on the property tax system, there is one other thing that will be in your service plan that will adjust those numbers. So, and it has to do with, it's responsive to the assessment rate that's set by the Colorado legislature. So Metro districts have no say over what that number is, that 6.25%. But Metro districts have a contractual obligation to the bondholders to be able to pay off that debt over the period of time that's allowed. So if the city said that you may have 40 years, that bondholder in New York City or wherever is going to want to know that they're going to recoup those costs. So what most cities and counties allow for in their service plan is called a mill levy adjustment. What is that? So this number, the 6.25, it was 7.15 less than 2 years ago. So you can see that number is going to drop those amounts down, and it can drop down substantially. So what most cities and counties allow for is a mill levy adjustment that says that if your service plan was authorized in 2005 and 50 mills value was $1,500, you may keep that number net neutral. So the district can adjust their mills up to keep that number net neutral. Can't go above, but it does allow for that so that those districts can pay off that debt at the end of the term. So if you see in your service plan that it said you had a cap of 50 mills and maybe your O&M is 10, so that would be 60 mills, and maybe what's on your property taxes is 62 mills. I would go in and I would say that probably, and I'm sure you have a mill levy adjustment in your service plan, your service plan has allowed that district to increase those 2 mills to keep that number net neutral. It's a little bit wonky, but it's super important because it will affect the amount that you're paying on your property taxes, and that is authorized within the law.
So who determines that adjustment? How, is there a set standard, like a gap standard or some accounting standard that goes across all of Colorado? Or does each one of the accounting firms determine
Yes.
their own formula, or?
So that is the accountant in collaboration with the board and with the district council. And that's what that mill levy certification process is. They go through the math based on what was authorized. So yes, there are, I don't know what the formula is, but yes, that is a very robust process with the CPAs, with the board, and those numbers can't be wrong when they submit them to the state.
So, well, I guess what I'm asking is, like with gap accounting or something, you have a certain standard so that that adjustment is consistent across multiple, anyone who had that market adjustment.
Yes.
So what I'm asking is there something out there for the accountants to look at to say, and if so, where is that?
Yes. What I will do, I will send that to you. So there is a property tax administrator that provides guidance. In fact, we were on the phone today with the assessor's office and the property tax administrator talking through, making sure, all of the accountants and the CPAs are very precise in that. But let me ask for that specific section. Sounds like that's of interest to you. So I can send that out to the group so that folks know what those standards are that the CPAs have to adhere to. Okay. Great question. I apologize. I don't know it off the top of my head.
Well, no, it's not in it yet.
I would love to.
I just need you to point me or get me to the right
I can
person.
do that. Do you want to add to that?
I was just gonna say, besides, one of the things, besides the assessment rate, I know that's gone down since, I think, 2016, 2017, where it was 7.96%. The state legislature has continuously, over time, dropped that. Something that was unique that we saw in the state of Colorado in 2023 and 2024, for budget years 2024 and 2025, is they also decided to provide a value reduction, which they did not do in 2025.
That was at 5,000 and something, wasn't it?
55,000 for residential, it was 30,000 for commercial.
Yeah, the complexities around your property taxes have been extreme these last couple of years. So yes, there is guidance and folks are, the last couple of years has been changing every year. And so metro districts are in the process of complying. And so there's some give and some take and some angst, as you might imagine, with all of that, but it's important. So
Because we have individuals in our district and they want to calculate that. They want to know specifically that, yes, this is exactly what it should be.
totally
And
fair.
so, yeah.
And
So
then
if the cap doesn't, when they go in, they look at the cap and then the cap doesn't match what they are being charged, and then we have to do an education process.
And what I would say to those folks too, go to your budget hearing. These are conversations that your board is going to be having as part of that budget hearing that is open to the public. Some will do it via Zoom, some will do it in person, some will have hybrid, but those are important conversations. But the certification, the final certification happens at the end of the year after all of those budget hearings are put into place. Okay, so who's at risk if things go wrong? What happens if the community doesn't build out quite the way that the developer thought it would, and maybe there are a bunch of vacant lots and there's not property taxes coming in on those lots? Who's at risk? The bondholder is the one that's at risk because the district has put those caps on the numbers of mills on the total debt. Now that doesn't mean that you may not have a vacant lot next to you, but from a financial perspective, your taxes, you, the county, the city, are not going to be the ones held liable to pay off that debt. If at the end of 40 years, there's not enough property taxes that have come in to pay off that debt, that has to get written off. So that's why these financial pro formas are super important. That's also why you see some variation on the interest rates based on the amount of risk that is out there because it is, the risk is borne by the bondholders. Questions on that? Okay, we've got like 2 minutes. I'm gonna go super fast. If anybody needs to leave, feel free. I'm just gonna highlight a couple of new laws so that folks know what they are. But again, please feel free to walk out. I've got just about 5 more minutes worth of information. So there are a handful of new laws that are on the books that are super important. I gave you the wrong year. This transparency law, the disclosure was 2021, not 2023. So the disclosure that I was referencing about new construction was part of this legislation. Now the developer or the home builder must disclose to the potential buyer before they sign that contract to start construction on that lot. They have to disclose, hey, you're in a metro district, here's a link to the website, here's the map around what your property taxes are on that piece of dirt, here's what it will be tomorrow once that home is built with all of the taxing jurisdictions on top of it. Happens before that cute young couple gets all the way down the road and is already invested in that property. A couple other things, calls for nomination. So calls, how do you know that you can run for your board seat? Folks nominate themselves, but how do they know that they can run for that board seat? So now every metro district that was created after the year 2000, they must send an email or a postcard to the residents, elected electors within that community, letting them know that there is an election coming up and here's the link to that website. My guess is you'll probably have some of your older portions of this community that fall outside of that year 2000 window, and others that are in it. So some of you may be getting that email, some of you may be getting the postcard. The other place, I did ask Kristen this specifically, where else can you all look, because they do have to publicly notice that there is a call for an election. The Gazette, the Colorado Springs Gazette, in their public notice section is where those calls for election will be. They are going to happen in the month of February. January, February is when you're going to see those advertisements in the odd year. So if you're not getting a postcard or an email, you can look on the website or in the public notice section of the Colorado Springs Gazette. Websites are now a requirement by law. All of those different documents that I showed you that are on those websites, those are mandated so that folks can do their due diligence, hopefully do some one-stop shopping. Annual reports are also now a requirement. Prior to, the cities and counties were requiring reports, just not necessarily every year. What is the annual report? It's a look back over the last year that gives the status of the construction, the status of the finances, the audit, if the district's in litigation with maybe the asphalt vendor, that's all noted in that. If they refinance, all of those things are in that annual report, and it must be publicly available on the website. It's also filed with the city or the county. Limitation of dominant eminent domain. So one other power that metro districts have, in addition to having that authority, is they have the power of eminent domain and dominant eminent domain. What is that? Eminent domain is the taking of private property. Dominant eminent domain is the taking of public property. Obviously not popular and not commonly used. Water and sewer districts are usually the ones that utilize this tool because they leave right away across multiple properties for sewer lines or for water lines. So that's typically when it's used. What this law says is if the district's going to utilize that, they have to go ask the county for permission first. So it just keeps that transparency open, keeps your local electeds involved in that process. Another bill, we talked a lot about caps on mills, caps on debt. So now by state law, every service plan must include a cap on the number of mills and a cap on the total amount of debt. What was happening prior to this? Most cities and counties were doing it through local ordinance, and I can tell you the city of Colorado Springs was absolutely doing it through local ordinance, but we didn't think it was unreasonable to think if there's a little city or county out there that didn't have these important caps, they need to include them. So now by state law, they must be in the service plan. Town hall meetings must occur at least once a year in every district so that board members and residents can get to know each other and you all can ask questions of those folks. They cannot conduct public business. They have to give an update on what's happening with the construction and the finances, but then they open it up for question and answer, an opportunity for you to get to know your neighbors and what's going on in your community. Capping of interest rates. Cities and counties can cap the interest rate. If you're going out to the bond market, they can say, you know, you can't go over 10% interest or whatever that number is. They would typically use an index to determine what that is. What this is talking about, though, is about what's called developer debt. So sometimes in the early stages of development, the project looks too risky to the bond market. They're not interested in investing in that until they see some homes coming out of the ground or some of the commercial properties. Well, what's the developer to do? Because they got to build the streets and the sewer before they can build the homes. So the law allows the developer to take on that debt with an agreement from the district to be repaid over time once property taxes are coming in. If the developer is going to act as the bank, if you will, the interest rate must be at or below market rate, and an independent municipal advisor must certify that it is at or below market rate. Typically, what would happen in an instance where you would have the developer taking on that early stage debt, once the project is getting going and the bond market is interested in that project, they would go in, they would refinance it, they would get repaid, and then they'd move on to the next project, and you would function just like the traditional way that we just walked through.
Is market rate dependent on like a 10-year treasury or how is that?
Yes, so the market rate is actually, so there are specific indexes listed within the statute, so and they're the commonly used indexes that the market would. Yeah, great question. Property disclosure. So this property disclosure is for realtors. This is on a resale. So you and I decide we want to sell our house. We're in a metro district. The law says that the seller must disclose to the potential buyer in the buy and sell contract that they're in a metro district. So at the same time that you might disclose that you have an HOA, you would disclose the website link to that metro district so that that potential buyer can do their due diligence on whether or not they want to live in that district. That is the earliest disclosure in the process on resale. That law was just added to this year. So now on a resale, the seller has to not only disclose the website, but they have to disclose all of the information that the developer or the home builder has to on a new construction. So now the seller has to disclose, hey, you're in a metro district, there's the services that are being provided by that metro district. Here's your property taxes today. Here is what your property taxes, what they will be tomorrow using the formula that we talked through. So it is an early disclosure to that potential buyer, letting them know that they're in that district so that they can make an informed decision whether or not they can afford those property taxes and what they could potentially go up to. Super important. Also in that, they required some more things on the website, emergency contact information. That's not if you paid your tax bill, you can call on emergency hours if you have a water line break or something like that. A lot of the information was pushed to the homepage. The particular elected official that ran this wanted to make sure you didn't have to go too deep into the website to find the information. And then now, eligible electors will get an email or a postcard letting them know about the annual meeting. In hopes that we'll get more people to come out to those annual meetings and engage with their board. I talked really fast there at the end. I don't know if I got into your question specifically about what the board does, but I'm here for questions. This is our contact information. I have business cards as well if you would like to take them. If you'd like copies of the presentation, or maybe you have a follow-up question that you didn't want to ask publicly, feel free to drop me a note. I'm super happy to do that. Yes, sir.
So kind of a follow-up on other discussions. I come from an HOA world where we didn't have metro districts. So somehow the developer financed the infrastructure and passed it into the home expense. And then when the build-out was done, they turned all that infrastructure over to the HOA. And so then the HOA had reserve funds that we were required to keep enough funds to repair and replace all that infrastructure. So is that part of the O&M in the Metro District that they're financing or putting away money in a reserve fund for that infrastructure?
Yes, so yes, those are some of the decisions, those are some of the things that the board is doing, is talking about, and all of these things are subject to Tabor, so there are very strict amounts that they can put in, but yes, those are decisions that your board of directors will be making. If there is, and I don't know that this particular district would ever go to a true HOA, which is under a different statute, but the Metro District, because it was paid for by taxpayer dollars, they can't just give it to an HOA because that's a private entity. It has to be, the district has to be reimbursed for those taxpayer dollars.
But there's no requirement for Metro Districts, there's the Tabor Emergency Reserve, which is a small amount, but that has to be maintained year after year after year, because it's a percentage of the budget. But there is no requirement of Metro Districts to have a reserve study and have reserves like what you're talking about for an HOA.
So
That has to be done. That's done, actually, all the budget, all the money, the revenue from all the districts in Banning Lewis Ranch go directly into MD1. And so it's part of the process of that budget. There's no separate budget for each one of the districts per se. Ron, that is correct. I know that's the simple.
Right.
Ron's got some of the details, he's gonna go into the more details,
I
but
understand that from Metro District One, it's all these other Metro districts, but isn't Metro District One responsible to have some kind of reserves to repair and replace their infrastructure?
there is the Tabor Reserve, but there's no law that says that they have to have a reserve, have to have a budget line item for reserves for the maintenance that I'm aware of. Ron, are you? I'm not aware of any law.
I'm not aware of any law. I was just looking to see if, because I believe Metro One does have reserves.
I will get clarity
I'll
on
talk to
whether
you
it's a
later. I'll
law
talk to
or
you
a best practice, because I believe most districts do have that reserve. So let me clarify where, and if it's law or if it's best practice, and I will include that in the.
Thank you. That would be great. And if we could find out, I don't know if you're part of your education, could find out the number of Metro districts that do have a line item for reserves and manage a reserve, I call them reserve studies, but manage their reserves, which is the maintenance of their major assets or assets over a certain dollar amount.
I will get clarity on that and circle back with the group whether it is law or best practice.
I have a question. I don't know. I'm not in something else. Like the Metro District Police, okay, people are violating the things that they're supposed to be doing. I was under the impression, like where I live, that during the summer, somebody comes out twice a month and checks these areas. If there's people in violation, I never got this answer. How do they send like warnings? What happens?
Yeah, so similar to an HOA, there are notices that go to that individual and they have a time frame that they have to, do what they're supposed to do, and there are penalties that they can assess. 2 years ago in legislation, so one of the extreme measures that used to be available is that Metro districts could foreclose on those properties, which is obviously extreme and something that's way down the road. We revoked that, and so Metro districts cannot foreclose on properties anymore for covenant enforcement issues. But they can assess fees, they can take you to court, There are a variety of ways that they can manage that. Your Metro District also will have documentation on the covenants and things that they have to abide by. That would be separate from the service plan. But yes, there are definite things. What I will say, on how frequently they go in, those are also some of those conversations that the board has to make. So they've got their O&M budget, and I'm gonna make up a number, they've got $10,000, and within that $10,000, they're gonna pay a contractor to go do that. They're gonna water the lawn, they're gonna pay for the audit, so you're looking, and those are the tough decisions that those people governing on those boards have to make, is the prioritization of how they're gonna spend those monies, and whether or not they are going to levy a fee, because it's important enough that they need extra revenue. So fees are outside of Tabor. So fees do not require a vote. They do require a justification, though. The board can't just say, we're gonna assess $10,000 from every property, and we're just gonna put it into our, recreation fund or whatever. No, they have to be able to justify it. But those are those decisions that they're gonna make, which is why the budget hearing is super important for you to go and ask those questions. Like, how are you prioritizing? You have $10,000, in revenues that you will collect this year. What are you gonna use those monies toward, and what are the potential fees that will be assessed to cover all of the other stuff that we all wanna make sure stays maintained?
I was just gonna say that on the district website, you can find that fine policy and what that process is and what those fines are. I do know that code enforcement in our community is in the community several times a week. However, as a growing community, I think we're up close to 4,500 homes. At the same time, as I understand it, part of that's governed too by state legislation. So if they start a process and they're deemed as correcting it, if they violate that again, you have to start all over. So it's very complicated.
Yeah, the state statutes have for HOAs and metro districts on covenant enforcement. The legislature cracked down significantly and put a lot of requirements on folks for how often, how much, how long the process, can the process start over, the foreclosure. So if anybody is interested in that, they'll let me know. I'll store your name and I can send you that bill to take a look at as well. I will just say in my closing thoughts, and I appreciate you all being here, these board members are your neighbors. They're people that are living in your community. They're taking on a pretty important role. These budget hearings are important. So you can ask these questions so that they can hear from you about what you believe your priorities, what the district's priorities should be. The other thing that I will just say, the state legislature continues to add mandates. We're hearing this on every industry, right? Unfunded mandates. The legislature keeps adding things that your district has to do, and they're important. I wouldn't say any of the things that they're requiring are not important, but it comes out of existing funds. So those limited monies that they had previously keep going like this, and they don't have discretion on whether they do an audit. They don't have discretion on a number of those things. They have to do that by state law. So again, that's why I encourage you, go to the budget hearing. They do have to take public comment so that you can offer your perspective on what is happening within your district. And I'm assuming you've got great elected officials in this community that are listening and taking that valuable input as they make those decisions for your community. So thank you. I'll stick around if folks have questions. Do you want to make some closing remarks?
No, I just want to make a correction. So on the question on the mill levies in the budget, so I went back and looked at the individual mill levies are in the budget. They can be found on the property tax information summary sheet. There's a mill levy section, and there's two line items. One's a general line item, which is for the general fund, and that pays for the O&M. And you can find out what mill levy for that is, and then there's a debt service line item, which is for your debt obligations. There's a separate mill levy.
That's on the property assessment.
It's in the budget.
Oh, it's in the budget?
In the property tax information summary.
Okay. It's also on the certification, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Great, thanks everybody, appreciate your time, have a great evening.
Thank you.